grab yourself a coffee and pull up a seat because today I'm teaching you how to play the Search for UAPs from Renegade Game Studios. Oh, and Bezier Games. Can't forget those guys. Let's continue. I'm Mark Maya, and this is Board Game Coffee.
Vincent, get back here this instant! Oh,
Thank you. Oh, I love you too. I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you. Thank you.
Over the last century, people have reported seeing strange things in the sky. Unidentified flying objects, if you will. While many of these sightings were once credited to the mid-20th century sci-fi craze, recent reports from respected military personnel, backed by video evidence, suggest there's something up there we can't quite explain. In the search for UAPs, you step into the role of an astronomy enthusiast who spotted something unusual amongst the stars. With the help of your telescope, camera, and research, you'll track down these unidentified anomalous phenomenons to help scientists better understand what they are. And to do that, you'll need to keep your eyes on the skies. The answers could be closer than you think. Today I'll be teaching you how to play the 1 to 5 player competitive game, The Search for UAPs. In the Search for UAPs, you'll need your wits along with this nifty companion app to gather clues and identify mysterious objects orbiting the Earth. Throughout the game, you'll attempt to gather as much information as you can by snapping photo evidence of these objects to earn points. Although the ultimate goal is to pinpoint the ever-elusive UAP. The player who contributes the most to these goals wins the game. Points. If you have the most points at the end, you win. Just in case that wasn't clear. Let's move on. In this video, I'll be teaching you how to play a 3-player game using the basic rule set. If you're looking to play with the expert rules, you'll find the necessary rule adjustments clearly labeled throughout the rulebook. It should be noted if you're playing with 5 players, then you have to play with the expert rule set. To play a solo game, there's a few rule adjustments you'll need to make that we won't be covering in this video, but you can find them in the back of the rulebook. Before we get to the setup, you should know that to play the Search for UAPs, you'll need to download the free companion app to your mobile device or tablet. Playing without the app is not an option. If you don't have enough devices for everyone at the table, that's okay. Multiple players can use a single device and just pass it around as needed. Although, for the best experience, I would definitely recommend everyone having their own phone or tablet. And you're going to want to make sure you're all charged up before you start. Oh, and being that the game uses wet erase markers, you might want to keep some damp paper towels on hand, or something to wipe off any little mistakes you might make. Now, if you're anything like me, then this would be more than enough. Heck, I've been using this same square for the last 6 games. But if you're more of a, let's say, Britney type of person, then you might want to take a trip to Costco.
Hey!
The game board is made up of 2 double-sided pieces, a basic side and an expert side. For this video, we'll be using the basic side, which looks like this. Although, as mentioned earlier, if you're playing with 5 players, then you'll need to use the expert side of the board. This smaller middle piece represents the Earth. Place it in the center of the bigger board and rotate it so that the 1 and 9 sectors are aligned. Both of these pieces are magnetized, so they stay in place nicely. Next, each player takes 2 researcher tokens in a color of their choice, and places one of them on the first space of the time track. Researcher tokens placed in this way should be stood up in a line. The order of the line should be decided randomly since it will be used to determine the order of play. The second researcher won't be placed until the app tells you to, so just hold on to them for now. Each player should now take a screen in their matching color and set it up in front of them like this. The player screen is not only filled with useful reference information that you'll need while you play, but it also hides all the information you'll gather from other players. Next, each player should collect the following: a wet erase marker, a noteboard, a satellite/scoreboard, and a set of spaceboards. Just like the main game board, your spaceboard is also made up of two double-sided pieces, a basic side and an expert side. The side you use should match the game board. So since we're playing on the basic side of the game board, we'll be using the basic side of our spaceboards. Attach the magnetized pieces just as you did with the game board, making sure that the number 9 sector and the number 1 sector are lined up. It's important that your spaceboard is aligned with the main game board. So if I was sitting here, I would align my spaceboard like this. But if I was sitting here, I would align my spaceboard like this, so that it matches exactly the position of the main game board. Lastly, gather 26 photo tokens in your matching color. You'll notice that some of the photos have a solid corner graphic like this, and others have a hollow corner graphic like this. These 8 photos with the hollow corners are only used in the expert game. So, since we're only playing with the basic rules, we can place these 8 photos back in the box. The remaining photos should be placed behind your player screen. Now it's time to set up the app. As mentioned earlier, to play the search for UAPs, you're going to need the companion app. Each player can use their own device or share a device with one or more players. The first thing you're going to need to do is download and install the app to your device. Now, if you have an Apple device like I do, then you'll download the search for UAPs from the App Store. If you're an Android user, then you can just grab it from the Google Play Store. Once you have the app installed and running, select one player and one player only to tap the Start Basic Game option on their device. At that point, the player will be presented with a code like this one. Each player then records this code on their own scoreboard. Now, all other players, everyone except for the one that generated the code, should tap this Enter Game Code option. This will take you to the screen where you enter the code that you just wrote down on your scoreboard, and then tap Join Game. At this point, verify that all devices are displaying the same game code. Then press Continue. Next, you'll be taken to a screen that will display which quadrant modifiers you'll be using and where they're placed. Simply place the depicted quadrant modifiers on the physical board so that they match the same modifiers displayed in the app. If you wish to swap out one of these modifiers, you can do so by tapping the quadrant you want to change, then selecting the modifier you would like to replace with one from the options provided. Now, this part is very important. If you do decide to swap out one of the modifiers, then make sure that everyone swaps out the modifier on their own device before they continue past this screen. If you're new to the game, I would recommend just using the options that the app originally suggested, and wait till you're a little more familiar with the game and how it plays before you start swapping out modifiers. Next, place the Luna token in the sector indicated on the app. Then, all players track the position of the Luna token by circling the Luna icon on their personal spaceboards. Next, select your player color and hit Continue. Now, using one finger, rotate the game board on the app so it matches the same way the board looks from where you're sitting, much like you did with the spaceboards. Then tap the lock icon in the upper right corner. This will lock down the position of the board on your screen so you don't accidentally rotate it while playing. Now, one thing you should know about sectors is that they can only ever contain one object. So, since we know that this sector contains the moon, we can safely cross out all the other objects in that sector. Once you're done that, follow the instructions on screen and cross off all the objects in the indicated sectors. After you're done crossing off all the objects you were instructed to, Your spaceboard should look something like this. Your spaceboard won't look like mine, since the app generates different locations for each object per game. So make sure you're crossing off the objects shown on your device, not this video. The next thing you'll need to do is select your difficulty level. The difficulty level you select will determine how many additional facts you will receive. For this how to play, we're going to set our difficulty level to beginner, which means we'll be receiving 8 pieces of information, which we'll see on the following screen. In this example, the app is telling us to cross off these 8 objects, which can be found in the indicated sectors. It's important to note that at this point, the information you receive after you select your difficulty is private information, and each player, regardless of the difficulty level they choose, will receive different information. It's also important to note that players do not have to play at the same difficulty level. If you're sharing a device, then you'll have to wait your turn before you get an option to choose. I'll show you an example of that shortly. Once you've selected your difficulty level, you'll be asked to place your researcher on one of these 4 quadrants. After you've placed your researcher, tap that quadrant in the app to lock in your decision, then tap Continue. It's important that the information on the board is the same as the information in your app. Once everyone has gone through the steps we just covered, tap Start Game to start playing. Now, keep in mind, if someone is sharing a device, this is the point where you would tap Add Player, then follow the steps prompted by the app. Select your colors, update your spaceboard with the provided information, select your difficulty level, update your spaceboard again, and select the quadrant to place your researcher. Keep in mind, there is no limit to how many researchers can be placed on a single quadrant. Once you're done adding players to a shared device, press Start Game. At this point, you'll be presented with a list of actions that you can take on your turn. But since we haven't learned how to play yet, you probably have no idea what any of this means. So, let's learn how to play. The Search for UAPs is a game about looking for specific objects in space, using logic and your skills of deductive reasoning. Now, that all sounds great, but what does it actually mean? You see, the game presents you with a set of rules that act like hints that lead you to specific objects. Let me give you an example. Let's say that the universal rule for my wife's dirty socks is that they're always on the floor. That's the rule. This means if I'm looking for my wife's dirty socks, I wouldn't look in the hamper and I wouldn't look out in the yard. I would only look for the dirty socks on the floor, because that's the rule. My wife's dirty socks are always on the floor. Now, to be clear, the search for UAPs has nothing to do with looking for dirty socks. The things we're looking for will be more space-oriented, like satellites and meteor showers, that sort of thing. And to help you find these objects, each player is given one of these spaceboards. If you look closely, you'll notice that each sector has a collection of icons. Each of these icons represents an object that could be found in that sector. But here's the thing. In each sector, there can only be one object. So if I discover a spy satellite in the sector, I can be certain that no other objects are present in that sector. As you play the game, you'll use the information you collect to eliminate objects that can't be in a certain sector, and circle the ones that you know for sure are in that sector. All the information you've gathered is private. Nobody else gets to see your spaceboard or any of your other notes. So make sure to keep them hidden behind your player screen. Alright, now that we got an idea of what the game's about, let's familiarize ourselves with the game board. The primary game board is made up of 2 orbits, the inner orbit and the outer orbit. As the game progresses, the inner orbit will rotate counterclockwise, but the outer orbit will always remain stationary. The board is broken up into 4 quadrants, as indicated by these thick white lines. Each quadrant on the basic side of the board contains 4 sectors. Keep in mind that as the Earth rotates, the quadrants will rotate with it, which means the sectors located within the quadrants will change. When a game refers to a sector that is next to something, it's specifically talking about sectors that are side by side, like this. Sectors that are above and below one another are referred to as stacked. And lastly, when the game refers to a sector that is directly across from something, it's referring to the sector that is located directly across the board and in the same orbit. So this sector is directly across from this sector, and this sector is directly across from this sector. During the setup, we place these quadrant modifiers on the main board. Quadrant modifiers introduce a set of rules that only apply to the quadrant where they're located, and only affect the players currently in that quadrant. The effects of these modifiers will vary from positive effects like charter flight, which allows you to move to and from a particular quadrant for free, to negative modifiers like overcast, that prevents you from taking photos in a quadrant. There are too many modifiers to cover in this video, but what each of them does is written right on them, and for the most part they're pretty self-explanatory. But if there's anything you don't understand or you're just looking for more information, there's a quadrant modifier reference section towards the back of the rulebook. During the game, you'll be searching for 9 different types of objects orbiting the Earth: Luna, the Moon, the Hubble Space Telescope, the International Space Station, meteor showers, a number of spy satellites, communication satellites, navigation satellites, space junk, as well as the UAP. As discussed earlier with my dirty sock example, each object in the game has specific rules governing which sectors it can occupy in relation to other objects and the orbits themselves. But remember the number 1 rule. Each sector can only ever contain 1 object. With that said, let's start with the easiest object to find in space, the Moon, aka Luna. There will only ever be 1 Luna object, and it's always located in the outer orbit, and is revealed to all players at the start of the game. Told you it was easy to find. The rules for the Hubble Space Telescope is that it's always located in the outer orbit, but it can never be located next to Luna. This means it could be in any of these sectors, but it could never be here or here, because both these sectors are located next to Luna. And there's only ever 1 Hubble Space Telescope. There's also only 1 International Space Station, and the rule is that it can only ever be located in the inner orbit, and it must be next to at least 1 junk. In this example, it could be located between these 2 pieces of junk, but not in these 2 sectors because there's no space junk next to those sectors. When it comes to spy satellites, there can be anywhere from 1 to 2 hidden on the basic side of the board. The rule for spy satellites is that they only appear in odd-numbered sectors, and can only be found in the inner orbit. There will only ever be 1 or 2 communication satellites to be found on the basic side of the board. The rule for communication satellites is that they always appear in even-numbered sectors, and they can appear in either orbit. Navigation satellites always appear in pairs on opposite sides of the board. So if I know there's a navigation satellite here in the inner orbit, then the other will be across the board in the same orbit. The same rule applies if you find it in the outer orbit. Since navigation satellites come in pairs, there will be either 2, 4, or 6 navigation satellites hidden somewhere on the basic side of the board. Meteor showers are also found in pairs, So there will either be 0, 2, 4, or 6 meteor showers to be found on the basic side of the board. Meteor shower pairs always come stacked. That means if there's one up here, then there will be one down here, and vice versa. Now, it's important to note that this positioning rule only applies to the state of the board at the start of the game. So as the inner orbit rotates, you'll have to track the position of meteor showers. Let's go over a quick example. Let's say that since the start of the game, the Earth has rotated a total of 2 sectors. This means if we find a meteor shower here, then we know that there was another meteor shower located below this space at the start of the game. But since the board has rotated 2 sectors since then, that would mean that the meteor shower we're looking for moved 2 spaces over. Because when the game started, this sector used to be here. Space junk can also be found in either orbit, but there can never be more than 2 space junk next to each other. In this scenario, we can be sure that there's no space junk in any of these sectors, because having space junk here would violate the rule that no more than 2 space junks can be next to each other. The amount of space junk you'll find will be somewhere between 1 to 5. The UAP can be found in either orbit, but there's only one of them. But what makes it unique is that it will always appear as space junk. This means that if these were all the sectors that contained space junk, one of them would actually be the UAP. I know it might seem like there's a lot of rules to remember, but don't worry. Every rule for the objects we've discussed is listed on the back of your player screen for easy reference. In the search for UAPs, the order of play isn't determined by moving clockwise around the table, as it is in many other games. Instead, it's based on the position of each player's token on the time track. The player whose token is furthest back on the time track becomes the active player. As the active player, you'll choose one of 6 actions to perform, and the action you select determines how far you advance on the time track. For example, if I choose an action with a time cost of 1, I would perform the action, then move my researcher token 1 space forward on the time track. After that, the blue player, being the furthest back on the track, becomes the active player. If the blue player also performs an action with a time cost of 1, they move their token forward by 1 space. If they land on a space already occupied by another researcher, the blue player's token is placed in front of the researcher that was already there. Next, the orange player becomes active, but they chose an action with a time cost of 5. This action moves their token 5 spaces ahead, placing them much further along the time track than any other player. But if the orange player's all the way up here, and the other players continue to take actions costing only 1 or 2 time, then it's going to be a while before the orange player gets to the back of the line, which means they're going to have a bit of a wait before they're the active player again. And if you're wondering, yes, it is possible for one player to take multiple turns back to back. If after taking an action and paying its time cost, a player still finds themselves at the back of the line because everyone else is way up ahead, they get to perform another action, and they'll keep performing actions and paying time costs until they are no longer in the back of the line. Okay, so you're the last person in line. You know what that means. That's right, it's your turn. On your turn, you'll select one of 6 available actions. Move, survey, target, take a photo, analyze satellite data, or find the UAP. Each action has an associated time cost, which dictates how many spaces you move your researcher along the time track. To perform an action, you'll tap the corresponding option in the app. If an action is grayed out, like the analyze satellite data in this example, it means that action is currently unavailable. The number displayed next to each action is the time cost for that action. Once you select an action, the app will guide you through the necessary steps and choices. Since the app pretty much walks you through the process of what happens on your device, I'll be mostly focusing on what happens on the table. Alright, let's go over each of those actions, starting with the move action. Many actions in the game are restricted to the quadrant where your researcher is currently located. To move your researcher to an adjacent quadrant, you'll need to use the move action, which has a time cost of 1. If you want to move 2 quadrants away, the time cost increases to 2. While you'll need to manually update the physical board by moving your research token from one quadrant to the next and advancing along the time track accordingly, in the app, once you've selected the quadrant you've moved your researcher to, it will automatically update your researcher's movement along the time track. Survey allows you to search the sectors in your quadrant for a particular type of object. To do that, I would first activate the survey action in the app, select the area I want to search, select the object I'm searching for, then tap Continue. The app will return a result of how many times that object appears in the sectors I selected, but it will never tell me which sector the object is in specifically. You'll have to deduce that on your own. Whenever you receive information about a sector, update your spaceboard and jot it down in your notes. We'll be going over note-taking a little later in the video. When selecting your survey area, you have several options, each with a different time cost associated with it. The more specific the area, the higher the cost. By selecting Quadrant, you survey all 4 sectors within your current quadrant for a time cost of 1. Orbit will survey any 2 sectors in your quadrant that are next to each other. This will have a time cost of 2. Stack is referring to 2 sectors in your quadrant that are above and below each other. This also has a time cost of 2. And lastly, you can choose to survey just a single sector for a time cost of 3. When you survey an area, you need to announce to the table which sectors you're surveying and what type of object you're looking for. However, keep the results of your survey confidential. That information is for your eyes only. And keep in mind, you can still survey multiple sectors, even if some of those sectors already have revealed objects. Target is great. It's expensive, but oh, so useful. For a time cost of 4, the target action allows you to select any one sector in your quadrant, and the app will reveal which object is in that sector. Then all you gotta do is track that information on your spaceboard. Doesn't get much easier than that. The Take a Photo action lets you guess the object in the sector within your quadrant. This action has a time cost of 1, and you can only take 1 photo at a time. Once you're confident about an object's location, you can take a photo to potentially earn points at the end of the game. To take a photo, browse the photos you received at the beginning of the game, select the photo of the object you believe you found, and place it face down in the sector where you think that object is located. There is no limit to how many face down photos can be placed in a single sector, but once placed, it cannot be moved. Remember to enter this information into the app, and make sure the other players don't see the object you selected. Photos placed in this way will be verified each time the Earth rotates, which we'll cover a little later in the video. And the last thing you need to know about taking a photo is, you cannot take a photo of a sector that already has a revealed photo in it. In order to perform the Analyze Satellite Data action, you'll need a satellite. So, until a satellite has been revealed by any player, this action cannot be performed. But as soon as a satellite is revealed, You can analyze its data. There are 3 different types of satellites that can be found: communication, navigation, and spy. And each of these satellites will provide different information. For the sake of this example, let's say that the location of at least one of each satellite type has been revealed. Now, remember, you don't have to be the one who revealed the satellite. As long as it's revealed on the board, you can analyze it. And unlike most other actions, you don't have to be in the same quadrant as the satellite that you're analyzing. You can target a satellite from anywhere on the board. When you select a revealed satellite in the app to analyze, you'll be presented with 2 distinct pieces of information. By selecting one of the options from a specific satellite, you'll be taken to a screen where you'll be given private information on the location of an object. Maybe you'll be told that the International Space Station is in an odd-numbered sector, or that the Hubble Space Telescope is not next to a communication satellite. Regardless of the information, once you've received it, jot it down in your notes. The app will then prompt you to advance your researcher token a number of spaces on the time track based on the satellite that you analyzed. If you analyzed a communication satellite or a navigation satellite, that will have a time cost of 1. But if you analyzed a spy satellite, that has a time cost of 2. When you're analyzing satellite data, announce to the table which satellites you're analyzing. And that's it. Don't give them any more information. And keep in mind, when you analyze a satellite, there's no reason to analyze it again for the same option, because the information you're going to get back will be the same. However, you may want to analyze it for the other option that you didn't select the first time around. The last action we're going to cover is Find the UAP. This is the big one, and it has a whopping time cost of 5. Remember, the UAP will always appear as junk, so you might have already seen it without even realizing it. Finding the UAP isn't just about guessing which sector it's in. You'll also need to identify what objects are located in the 3 neighboring sectors. For example, if I suspect that the UAP is in this sector here, then I would also need to know what objects are in this sector, and this sector. If I guess even one of those objects wrong, I fail the search for the UAP. So make sure you have your facts straight before you attempt this one. Within the app, tap the Find the UAP button. Then select which sector you think the UAP is in and hit Continue. The app will then ask you what object is located in each of the 3 neighboring sectors. Once you've confirmed all your guesses, you'll be told whether you found the UAP or not. When looking for the UAP, do not announce where you're looking. Just let people know that you are looking, and then let them know if you succeeded or failed. Because the first player to find the UAP triggers the end of the game, which we'll go over a little bit later. Once the last researcher token crosses this thick line on the time track, the Earth will rotate counterclockwise by 1 sector. The arrow here will act as a reminder. This rotation occurs each time all of the researchers cross one of these marked sections on the track. When the Earth does rotate, make sure to update the position of your spaceboards to reflect the new position shown on the main board. In the app, you can easily rotate the Earth by tapping this rotate icon. Each time the Earth rotates, all face-down photos on the game board are flipped face up and verified to see if they're correct. To verify the photos on the board, tap the Verify Photos button on the app, then turn up all the face-down photos. When you flip over a face-down photo, make sure it's oriented like this to distinguish it from any other photo that might have already been verified. If players other than you have taken photos, you'll have to add those to your device manually. As you can see here, all the photos that I place on the board are indicated in my app, but not the ones placed by other players. To add those photos, simply tap the Add Photo button, select the sector you want to add the photo to, then select the type of photo. Once you've added all the photos you need to, tap Continue to proceed to a list of all the photos awaiting verification. If you spot any errors, you can tap the X next to the photo to remove it from the list. After confirming that the list is accurate, tap Verify Photos to proceed to the verification screen. Here, you'll see which photos were correctly identified and which were not. Photos that are incorrect should be removed from the board and placed back in the box. They do not return to their original owners. And the player who took the incorrect photo moves one space ahead on the time track for each incorrect photo they took. Verified photos, on the other hand, will remain on the board and should be rotated to indicate that they have been checked. These verified photos will earn you points at the end of the game, assuming they're your photos. At some point during the game, you'll notice this green UAP icon pulsing on your screen. This means that new information about the UAP has just been declassified by the government. By tapping this icon, you'll be taken to a Declassified UAP report, which will give you useful information to help you deduce the location of the UAP. This information should be recorded at the bottom of your noteboard. Although, if at any point you miss any information or just want to double check that you've written it down correctly, you can always tap the green UAP icon again to review all the information you've received so far. Now, this part is very important, so listen up. Even though all players will receive the same UAP information, when they receive the information is not the same. So, when you receive this information, keep it to yourself. Do not share it with other players. They are not your friends. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I'm terrible at taking notes. Not just for this game, I mean in general. But the designers for Search for UAPs have made note-taking easy. This is your noteboard, and your noteboard is used for taking notes. The noteboard is broken up into 3 columns. In this column, you'll record the action you took. In this one, you'll record the result. And in this one, you can jot down any extra information that you might find useful. To help you out, once you've finished entering your action into the app, you'll see this little window that looks like a tiny segment of your noteboard. In that window, you'll see a note for the action you just performed. So I can just copy what I see in this window to my noteboard. Brilliant. This bottom section here is used to record the declassified UAP information that you receive throughout the game. Over here on the back of your scoreboard is where you'll record the information you've gathered by analyzing satellites. You'll notice that each satellite has 2 lines, one for each bit of information that the satellite has to offer. The end of the game is triggered when one player correctly identifies the location of the UAP. But even though they've ended the game, that player still needs to advance their researcher token 5 spaces on the time track. Now remember, and this is very important, when you find the UAP, do not announce the location to other players. This might be the end of the game, but it's not over yet. Once the end of the game has been triggered, no more turns are taken. However, each player whose researcher is at least 1 space back on the time track from the player who found the UAP will get one final opportunity to score points. Those players will have the option to either take photos or try their hand at finding the UAP. One of your final scoring opportunities is to take photos. This is a great way to earn some last-minute points before going into final scoring. If you choose to take photos, then the number of photos you can take will be based on your position on the time track. If your researcher is 1 or 2 spaces behind the researcher who ended the game, you may take 1 photo. If you're 3 or 4 spaces back, then you can take up to 2 photos. But if you're 5 spaces back from the researcher who ended the game, you can take up to 3 photos. And the best part is, these photos can be taken in any quadrant, regardless of the position of your researcher. During this final scoring opportunity, players do not advance their researchers on the time track. So place your photo, but leave your researcher right where they are. The other way to earn some last-minute points is to take a shot at finding the UAP. The procedures for finding the UAP will be the same as we covered earlier in the video. The only difference is how much you score. The player who initially found the UAP will earn 10 points at the end of the game. Any player who finds it after that will earn points based on how far back they are on the time track from the player who triggered the end of the game. So, if I was 1 space back from the player who initially found the UAP, I would earn a whopping 2 points. I know, not great, but it's something. If you're 2 spaces back, you'll earn 4 points. 3 spaces back, and you'll earn 6 points. If you're 4 spaces back, you'll earn 8 points. And if you're 5 spaces back, then you earn 10 whole points. Not too shabby. Now, you'll only get 1 shot at this, so if you get it wrong now, you won't earn any extra points. After all the final scoring opportunities have been resolved, press the End Game and Reveal All button within the app. The screen will display the objects located in each sector. Flip over each face-down photo on the board and compare it to the results shown in the app. All incorrect guesses will be removed, and all correct guesses will remain on the board for final scoring. Once the game has ended, each player tallies up their own score and records it on their personal scoreboard. Let's walk through an example. If I was the player who found the UAP and triggered the end of the game, I would write 10 points in this box here. But if I wasn't the first player to find the UAP, and instead found it as the result of a final scoring opportunity, then my score would be dependent on how far back I am from the player that initially found the UAP, just as we discussed earlier. There's a chart here that will help you determine how many points you earned. If you're 1 space back, you'll earn 2 points. If you're 5 spaces back, you'll earn 10 points. Over here, you'll record how many points you've earned for each verified photo you took. Each object is worth a different amount of points. So multiply the photos you took of a specific object by the point value listed beside it. So in this example, I got 4 points for finding 1 International Space Station, but I got 6 points for finding 2 spy satellites, because each spy satellite is worth 3 points. After you're finished filling out the boxes, add it all up and figure out your total score. The player with the highest score wins. If there's a tie, the player who scored the most points for finding the UAP is the winner. If there's still a tie, the player who took the most verified photos is the winner. And if there's still a tie, the tied player who found the UAP first is the winner. Congratulations, you've earned it. And that's it. I hope this video helps, and I hope you enjoy playing the search for UAPs. See you next week. Thanks for joining us. If you like this video and you want to see more, subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to keep up to date with everything we do here at Board Game Coffee. But if you want to see more right now, we got plenty of videos to choose from. And if that's not enough, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Mark Maya, and this is Board Game Coffee. And remember, have fun, keep gaming, be social. See you next week.